Okay, so before we, good morning, everyone. Before we show you the screen for the Imrei Yaakov, what I wanted to do was go over a section of the Aruch HaShulchan, which is a 19th century condensation and elaboration on the Shulchan Aruch. We'll be referencing the Aruch HaShulchan a lot. The Aruch HaShulchan and the Mishnah Berurah sort of compete for the voice of the final authority, like the last major commentary on Shulchan Aruch. And so there is no Mishnah Berurah on Choshen Mishpat, but fortunately there is an Aruch HaShulchan on many sections of Choshen Mishpat. So when it comes to this din of mechusar amana, of keeping your word, it's clearly not as severe as a person who goes back on a deal after money has been put down, after money has been transferred. And yet, what we're seeing from the language of the Rav Shulchan Aruch is that it's very important for a person to fulfill his word. If you entered into an oral contract, you have two parties who have agreed that they're going to go ahead with some kind of exchange, either a sale or a gift. So then it's really important to follow through. So I just wanted to take a look at the language of the Aruch HaShulchan today. I'm going to bring it up on the screen now. Here we go. I hope everyone can see it. It is the Aruch HaShulchan from Rabbi Chiel Michal Epstein, from Siman Reish Dalid Sif Ches. And the Aruch HaShulchan writes as follows: Hanosei v'nosein bidvarim bilvad, that if a person has only entered into an oral contract, afal pi sheyachol lachzar bo ve'eno chayev b'mishapara, even though he has permission, he has the legal right, I should say, to go back on the deal, even without getting cursed in Beis Din, mikol makom roi lo la'adam la'amod b'diburo, av shelo aser shum kinyan rak dvarim ba'alma. But nonetheless, it is appropriate, it is proper for a person to fulfill his word, even though he's never made a kinyan, and all there has been is just a verbal agreement. And anyone who goes back on the deal, whether it's the seller or the buyer, the chachamim are not happy with him. He's what's called acting in bad faith. But then he qualifies it. And this is brought from the Ramah. We're not going to see the Ramah actually itself inside today. I thought this was a good abbreviated format. He says, but this is only when the price has not changed, has not fluctuated since the time that they made the oral agreement. But if the price has fluctuated, then no one is acting in bad faith by going back on the deal. V'lo dami lamos t'sarach hachozer lekabel mishapara af behuzal ohukar. He says, and this is a really important difference between the case of where money has been exchanged. He says, when money has been exchanged, even if the price goes up or down, anyone who goes back on the deal is subject to the curse of mishapara. So what's the difference? Why can't a person say, I gave you the money or I gave a down payment on the purchase, and now I realize that the whole thing is, the whole market has changed. But why is he still subject to the curse of mishapara? Zehu mipnei shemos havyan midioraisa kinyan gamor. He says the reason is because midioraisa, exchange of money, constitutes a kinyan. It's only rabbinically where we say that it doesn't. So since there really has been an exchange that's taken place and a person wants to back out based on a rabbinic law, that's why the Chachamim said, we who told you that the kinyan is not a kinyan, we also tell you that you have to accept a curse if you're going to rely on us. Avol dvarim ba'alma ein tzarich lekayim b'makom sheyesh lo hefsid mishini hamekach ve'ein ze mechusar amana. He says, but when it comes to just a verbal contract, you're not in violation. There has been actually no transaction on any level, neither on a D'oraisa level nor on a D'Rabbanan level. And therefore, there's no acting in bad faith if the price is fluctuated. He says, because the contract was entered into at a time when the value of the object was different. In other words, when I entered into, the argument is that the backing out party is totally innocent, because when I entered into the contract, it was under the pretenses that I was purchasing or selling an object with value X. Now the object has value X minus Y. I never entered into a contract for that kind of value. And so therefore it's a totally different scenario. And then he brings the second opinion of the Ramah, because the Ramah at the end of that discussion says something surprising. And he says that, and as he says, V'yesh omrim da'afilu b'chi ha'gavna yesh bo mishum mechusari amana. He says, some say that even in a scenario where the price has changed, a person who backs out is considered to be acting in bad faith. And as we saw in the Imrei Yaakov, you can even call that person a Rasha. You can go so far as saying you're a bad person. And you can actually, if that person, according to this opinion, if the person was going to ask a Rav, what should I do? The Rav, according to this opinion, should tell him, yes, you have to fulfill your word. And what's the argument when the price is changed? The Kevin de Beish Emunim Havi Dvarim Gemar Inyan. He says, because when it comes to trustworthy people, their word is their bond. That's essentially what the Aruch HaShulchan is saying. When a man of who values his reputation and his honesty and his word, when he says something, that's the final word. So therefore, malo l'shinoi mekach. Then what difference does it make if there was a fluctuation in price? This is the guy that you're dealing with is a person who's more concerned about his reputation than he is about making a buck. And so v'Rabbeinu harama hichriya kedeyazu. And that's the surprising part, is that the Ramah brings both opinions in the Shulchan Aruch. And he says the second opinion, the latter opinion, is more correct, which is quite shocking when you think about the way people do commercial trades in today's world. Oral contracts mean almost nothing in today's world, unless maybe in the diamond industry, where they say mazel ubracha, and they shake hands and it's done. But and even that today doesn't work anymore, because it's not exclusively a Jewish business. The Indians have really taken over the business for the most part, and so they don't. No longer, even in the diamond industry, is business done on a handshake. However, after we've seen the Ramah now, the Aruch HaShulchan adds v'ha'achronim nistapku bazeh, but the later opinions actually question this halacha that the Ramah paskins like the second opinion. Ume Yerushalmi mashma kedeya rishon, and the Gra actually says that if you look in the Talmud Yerushalmi, it implies that the first opinion is more correct, that if there's been a change in price, there's absolutely nothing wrong with backing out on the deal. V'nira demidina vaday ein bazeh mishum mechusari amana, rak mimidas chasidus, va'asi shapir hakol v'doik. And the Aruch HaShulchan says that I will be the machriya. I will try to reconcile the two opinions. Yes, it's true that mi'ikar hadin, that the halacha, based on the Yerushalmi, like the Vilna Gaon says, is correct. That really, when there's been a fluctuation, a significant fluctuation in price, since we made our original oral deal, each party has a right to back out, and you're not even called a person who's a mechusar amana. You're not a Rasha, you're not a bad guy, and no Rav is going to tell you that you're obligated to hold that word. However, the first opinion still has truth to it as well, because the first opinion is telling you what a pious person would do, what a person who wishes to go above and beyond the letter of the law. And there's value to that as well. As we're going to see, the next part of the Rav Shulchan Aruch is going to say that a pious person even though there's absolutely no halachic obligation whatsoever, a pious person tries to even fulfill his thoughts that haven't even yet been articulated in words. And so the way that the Aruch HaShulchan understands this is that when there's been a fluctuation in price, piety, midas chasidus, demands of a person who lives his life as a pious person to always follow through on his word. And therefore, yes, we know people like that who are more concerned about their reputation than they are about making money. And for those people who are pious like that, who say, I said it, maybe I should have been more explicit in the way that I structured the deal, but since I told the guy that I was going to sell it to him for X, and I didn't anticipate that there was going to be a huge change in price, I'm going to follow through on my word, and it doesn't matter. My piety demands that the loss of money that I stand to incur by selling it or buying it at that price is not going to affect the deal. Okay? Questions, comments?
One quick question, Rabbi. Do we make a distinction between changes in price fluctuations, those kind of normal things, and, for example, someone's health circumstances or family circumstances then make him want to back out or need to back out of the deal because it was something that was unexpected and it's not the kind of thing that, fluctuations happen, but this sort of came as would that be a distinction?
Right. So, Paul, if you remember, we saw a case history when it came to Mishpat. There's even, when something is totally out of left field and totally unexpected, there's even more of a reason to be lenient to allow a person to back out of a deal. And even when money has already been exchanged, we said that there's no Mishpat if a person was only wanted to purchase something because he, like the case of the still of the distillery, if you remember that,
Yes.
There was a guy who wanted to buy a still, but then learned that, and he put down money for it, but then he discovered that his brother passed away and left him as an inheritance, left him a still. So he didn't need to buy it anymore. So he's very apologetic, right? And halachically, we say, listen, there was no way this guy could have anticipated that his brother was going to pass away. Mm-hmm. And therefore, he doesn't have to accept, in that case, a mishapara. So you're right.
And I'm suggesting that might not even be considered bad faith or losing your reputation or your name because...
That's exactly what I'm saying. Remember,
right,
mishapara is far worse than mechusar amana. Mishapara, once we say that there's no mishapara, then kal v'chomer, there's no mechusar amana.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you, Rabbi. Yep.
You got it. Let me just, before we go into the Imrei Yaakov, let me just look at the next seif here in the Aruch HaShulchan, because we're going to see that in the Imrei Yaakov as well. And the halacha that the Aruch HaShulchan writes is about gifts. Mechusar amana, which is acting in bad faith, can apply when you promise someone that you're going to give them something, even though it's not a sale. He says, "V'chein mi she'omer lechaver litein lo matana v'lo nasan, harei mi mechusari amana." How many times has it happened to you where someone says, "Oh, I have the most amazing book I'm going to give you, or the most amazing article, I'm going to send it to you," and the guy never does it. He never gives you the thing that he says he was going to give you. Well, there's actually the halacha addresses such a person. Someone who says that he's going to give you something, right, and he doesn't follow through with it, that person is a mechusar amana. He's acting in bad faith. And that meaning that he's not a person whose word is his bond, and he doesn't really care about, he's cavalier with the way that he uses his words. And what this halacha really is geared towards is trying to sensitize us that when you say something, you should say it with gravitas, that you should say it with the realization that when you say you're going to do something, you have to follow through with it. Unfortunately, we are living in such a fast-paced world that we don't take our words as seriously. In the ancient world, there was no telephone. In the ancient world, there was no email. And so when people would communicate, words carried far more import to them. And you see this from the halacha. Today we drop statements, we say things that we forget the minute later that we even said them, right? But communication has therefore essentially changed, and unfortunately one could argue that it's changed for the worse, because our words are not as meaningful and purposeful as they used to be. Because when you wrote a letter and you had to, first of all, find a piece of paper and spend money for the paper, and then you had to find a quill and ink, and sometimes you would have to even hire a scribe to write something for you, because your handwriting was not legible. And then you had to find a postal carrier who was prepared to deliver the letter from one city to another, and you had to pay exorbitant amounts of money in order to get the communication across. In those days, communication meant a lot, to be able to communicate with someone. So the same thing applies when it comes to verbal contracts as well. And so this halacha should sort of sensitize us. If I said I'm going to do something for someone, then I have to follow through on my word. And if I don't, I'm what's called a mechusar amana, meaning that your word is not serious. B'amed dvarim amurim, when is this true? B'matana mu'etes, shaharei samcha daito shel hamekabel b'shah shehivticho. He says, but that's only true when we're dealing with a gift that has small value, small to no value. He says, because it has very little value, the recipient assumes that the giver is going to follow through on his gift. As the guy says, I'm going to drop off a book at your house this Motzei Shabbos, and something happens, he forgets, his children are hocking him, or his wife, or whatever happens, he's not able to drop off. He totally forgot about it. He says the feelings of disappointment on the recipient's part make the giver, who was supposed to do that and didn't end up doing it, make him a mechusar amana. Aval b'matana meruba ein bazeh chisaron amana. He says, but when it comes to a much larger, more valuable gift, he says, if a person says, I'm going to give you my car, he says and he doesn't follow through, there's less of a problem of mechusar amana in that case. Why? Shaharei bevadai lo samach hamakabel al devaro ad shiyase eze kinyan. He says, because there's no reliance on the verbal commitment, and because everyone knows that if we're going to enter into an exchange of property of that size, it's not to be taken seriously until we actually make a kinyan and enter into a legal exchange. I say I want to give you my car, but the guy knows that the deal will not be realized until he actually comes across with paper, or we do some kind of legal exchange where he transfers the title of the car from himself to me. The imha makabel hu ani v'hivtiach lo b'toras tzedakah afilu b'matana meruba ina yachol lachzer bo k'moshi yizbar ke'ein zeh b'simin mem gimel. He says, but that's only true if both fellows are not poor. But if the recipient is poor and he's relying on that gift because I told him I'm going to give it to him as tzedakah, I'm going to give him my car because I realize he doesn't have a car and he needs to work, and without the car he's not going to be able to work, and he's really relying on it. So then there is a mechusar amana. In other words, the bottom line is, what is the level of reliance of the recipient on my verbal commitment to give him something of significant value? V'cheinim rabim amr liyachid litein lo matana yesh misha omer dinikra mechusari amana keshechozim bahem afilu inhi matana meruba. And similarly, if there's a public entity, in other words, it's not just one person, but it's a group of people who make a verbal commitment to give someone something, right? Let's say a company makes a commitment to a person who's come in for an interview, and they say to that person, we're gonna hire you, and we're gonna give you this X salary. The next day he comes in, and they tell him, well, we've had a change of heart. So in that situation, that's also called mechusar amana, because since it's a group of people, it's not just an individual, then he has a sense of reliance that the company has the wherewithal to make good on its word. Va'afilu eino ani de berabim mikrin mechusari amana ach bedavar gadol mitnei shahamekabel somach al divreihem shebevada yekaimu. He says, because again, it's dependent upon that you look at the reliance factor of the recipient. The guy was told by the company that they're going to hire him, or a person was told by a group of people he's going to receive a gift. So in that situation, if his reliance is to the point where he says, well, it's one thing for one person to back out, but a group of people to back out on a commitment, that's unexpected. And therefore, the group of people are called mechusar amana, even if they promised an object of significant value. Va'od, the al kol yachid lo yagia matana meruba. And furthermore, even though it's a gift of significant amount, but since a group of people are guaranteeing that gift, no one person has to bear the brunt of a significant expenditure, and that's why the guy has full reliance. And he then quotes from the Vilna Gaon, and he says, from the words of the Vilna Gaon, it seems that if a group of people had orally committed to do something for someone or to give someone a gift, then they're not even allowed to back out on the deal, because because there is the idea that when a group of people make an oral contract, that oral contract is a binding kinyan. And he says, I'm not sure whether we paskin like that or not, but it's certainly worthwhile to be choshesh for it, to be concerned about that opinion. So that if a group of people, and the example that I'm thinking of is if a group, like a board of directors of a company, tells one of their employees that he's going to get a bonus, let's say by the end of the year, and then they decide they're going to take that back. So that too would be a mechusar amana issue, and it could very well be, like the Vilna Gaon said, that they become legally obligated in it, because once a group of people make a commitment, that becomes legally binding. So he doesn't have absolute closure on that. He's not sure whether that's an absolute halacha, but at least it's something that you see is to be taken very seriously. Okay, questions, comments? If not, let's go back to the text of the Imrei Yaakov. And let's see here for just a sec. Okay, so here we are. So based on all of the information that we've seen, now we can take a look at basically everything that we've read in the Aruch HaShulchan this morning is encapsulated in this little paragraph in the Imrei Yaakov Sifkat and Hay. So I don't see any reason for us to go through it again, because it's really a recap of the Aruch HaShulchan. But so maybe what we'll do is we'll go back to the previous page and we'll get started on this long piece in the Biurim. I mentioned that Rav Stern wrote a section called Biurim. It's like the Bir Halacha, where he gives more in-depth analysis. So we're not going to go over every piece in the Biurim, but there are some times where I think it'll be relevant for us to see. So let's take a look at what he says. Hachozer bo, anyone who goes back on an oral contract is called mechusar amana. So we're on page Beis again. He writes as follows: B'mekach hanikmor b'dvarim yesh bo shlosha ofanim. He says any kind of sale that is only stated orally, you have to take into account three different levels. Ofan harishon hu kamosha kasav harambam perak aleph mehilchos mechira halacha aleph v'shulchan aruch simukuf peites sheheidu aleihem edim va'omar hamocher bayazani mocher lach o yain zani mocher lach. He says the first scenario is where, this is what the Rambam describes in the laws of sales, where two people are speaking, there are witnesses present, and the seller says to the buyer, I hereby sell you my house. or I hereby I'm selling you I commit that I'm selling you this barrel of wine. Upasku hamos, and they fix the price. V'ratza halokeach v'amarni kanisi, and the buyer says, agreed, it's a done deal. The hamocher amar ani mocharti, and the seller says, agreed, it's a done deal. The amru le'edim havu aleinu edim shekvar shemachar zeh v'shalakach zeh ad kan devarav. And both the buyer and seller turn to the witnesses and say, you are witnesses to this deal. Now that's a pretty significant scenario, right? Because there's a recognition that they are enacting some kind of transaction in front of witnesses, even though there's no legal kinyan, and even though there's been no exchange of money. Uva ofen zeh vaday havi mekach gomer shenigbar b'neihem, rak lo haya bo kinyan hamoil. He says, in that situation, that really is a solid agreement to a sale, and the only thing that hasn't taken place is the actual technical legal transaction. But the meeting of the minds, there is an agreement that the deal is done. There's witnesses. The only thing that's lacking is the actual transactional action, the physical act of kinyan. And therefore, someone who goes back on a deal like that, on that oral deal, is certainly going to be subject to being called acting in bad faith, right? That's clear. But let's now take a look at the second scenario. Ofen hasheni hu heicha shahamocher hiskim limkor, o hakona hiskim liknos v'hivtiach hamocher lahakona limkor lo. He says this is not as committal. The second case is where the seller agrees to sell or the buyer agrees to buy, and the seller said, don't worry, I'm going to sell it to you. And the buyer says to the seller, don't worry, you can trust me, I'm going to buy it. Even though they didn't say explicitly this is a done deal, but they guaranteed that each party is going to enter into the transaction in the future, so it's not as committal. And in the language, mikol makom nira shegam bazeh ika chisaron amana. He says, but there too, there's anyone who backs out at that point is acting in bad faith. Dizelo shna me omer litein matana lechavero. He says, because it's no different from a person who promises to do a favor or to give a gift to his friend. And as we'll see, this is clear from the Gemara and from what we'll learn in the next halacha. We go to the next page, etc., etc. You can skip to the end of the bracket. V'chein mashman v'divrei harav shehevi di'arei shemayim yesh lo l'kaim afilo machshavos libo. And this idea that you're a mechusar amana by entering into a verbal commitment that you will purchase it, that you're a mechusar amana, is also implied by the language of the Rav Shulchan Aruch, because the next level, he says, is that even to fulfill your thoughts that have not been actually verbalized, a pious person should do. She'im gomar belibo limkor v'gomer mashma deb'chiyai gavna im haya dibur az yesh bo mishum chisaron amana, which implies that anything which was actually verbalized is subject to a mechusar amana. So that's the second level. So let's just be clear. The first two levels are, number one, where the two parties say it's a done deal. The object is yours. The seller says to the buyer, the object is yours. The buyer says, okay, it's mine now. Now, technically, there's been no kinyan. So even though they say it's a done deal, it's really not a done deal. But nonetheless, they wanted to have the power of a done deal. Anyone backs out in that case is truly a mechusar amana, is acting in bad faith. But even if there's just a commitment, trust me, I'm going to buy it. Trust me, I'm going to sell it only to you. There is a chisaron amana there also. Ulam yesh ofen shlishi hamatzoi lamasa. But now I want to talk about a third scenario, which is prevalent, which is not so clear. It's a much more gray area. V'hainu sha'adam nichnas lachanus liknos eza chayfetz. A guy walks into a store to buy a piece of merchandise. Ula'akar mekach umemka masa umatan rather shebeinehem ishtabu al mechir mesuyim. After some negotiation, they arrive at an agreed upon price. Ucheshabol l'shalem roa koner she'ein etzlo maspik ma'os v'omer l'mocher shu holech lahaviyam. The buyer then reaches into his pocket, realizes he doesn't have sufficient funds, or he doesn't have his credit card on him, and he says, listen, I'm going to go get the cash, I'll bring it back. And then after the guy has left, a new guy comes in and wants to buy the same object. Now, clearly in this situation, we're not talking about where there are multiple of these objects. It's, let's say he goes into an art gallery or something like that, where it's a one-of-a-kind piece or it's the last piece of merchandise. The question is, when does the seller have an obligation to hold the item for the buyer who has only made a verbal commitment to come back and buy it? And when is he not obligated? And that's something that we'll see in Yirtzeh Hashem when we commence with this next week. Questions, comments?
One quick question about that middle situation. Is that kind of right of first refusal? Like you say, we're going to come to an agreement, and then they sort of, I guess, subsequently enter into discussion as to price and terms. It's like, I will sell it to you if we can come to an agreement, and if we can't, then I'll open it up to someone else.
Well, here you added a little twist to it where they haven't come to a price. The second level, it seems like they've already come to a price.
Okay.
They've already come to a price, and each one commits that they will enter into the transaction. It's less severe than the first case because in the first case, they both make it sound like the deal is already done. Okay. There's nothing more to talk about.
Right.
The second is what we both commit that we will complete this purchase next week.
Okay, so it's stronger than that. Okay, thanks.
Okay, have a good Shabbos, everyone. Oh, I get a mazel tov. I had a new grandson last night.
Mazel tov, Rabbi.
Mazel tov,
Mazel tov,
Mazel
mazel
tov.
tov.
Mazel tov, Rabbi.
Mazel tov.
Thank you. Have a good Shabbos, everyone.
Good Shabbos.
Be well, everybody. Take care.